Welcome back. On Friday, I had a chance to sit down with Senator Marco Rubio and discuss a variety of issues. I started with the breaking news that Senator Kirk Tillis had resigned and asked him his opinion about it.
What I know about it is what I've read in the press. I wasn't there. I haven't talked to him or anybody who was in the room. I know Perry Thurston. I know Audrey Gibson actually very well. She served with me in the House. We're good friends, and I'm sorry to see she found herself in that position, because I know that's not what she's in Tallahassee to do. She didn't seek this out. It's an unfortunate thing, an inappropriate, obviously, thing that he said, and my understanding is he's resigned, and in the end, you know, what people don't realize is the legislative bodies, the Senate, the House, they're the judge of their own members' qualifications. They can remove members from their seats, and it sounds like that's where the Senate was headed. And so there's no doubt that Senator Tillis made the right choice in light of that. It had gotten in the way of, I think, the Senate being able to function in Tallahassee, and ultimately, I think, probably gotten in the way of his ability to continue to serve effectively.
You went through a similar circumstance when you were incoming Speaker with Roth Arzo, who was also caught using a racist term and ended up resigning. Where are we? Where do you think we are when incidents like this do come up from time to time? You know,
I think it happens, and when it happens, it has to be dealt with. And for the most part, people need to recognize that when you're in public office, the words you use, your behavior is held at a different standard. And in the case of a collegial body like the Senate, where you need to work with 39 other people in Tallahassee to get things done, how you comport yourself with your colleagues has a direct impact on your effectiveness. Obviously, the terminology that was used is inappropriate in any setting, and I think people, for the most part, know that. And then when they make these horrible mistakes or decisions, or say these incredibly difficult or horrible things, I should say, they need to understand that you're not going to be treated, nor should you be, like anybody in some other job. You hold a public trust, you're a representative of those districts, and you're going to be held to a different standard, and people should know that coming in. No one forces anyone to run for office, and no one forces you to serve in the state Senate.
We're coming up on the 100-day mark for President Trump. Give me your assessment. How do you think he's doing?
Well, like any presidency, it's the first 100 days I've ever had. I've never been around another president in the first 100 days, and he's had successes and obviously some high-profile disappointments. The health care law, nothing's happened, but that's a difficult issue, and everyone knew that going in. You have a new baseline, right? The baseline is not 2009; it's what people have now, and they want to see how a law compares to what they have today. And so that's a dynamic that needs to be worked through, and so that's made it difficult. On the other hand, probably the most consequential thing that he may do in his first term, unless there's some international crisis, is the Supreme Court nomination of Neil Gorsuch. And getting him on the court was a big achievement for the president. And in fairness, for all the criticism he gets, Neil Gorsuch is the person that could have been nominated by any of the 16 other Republicans that ran, and probably would have been. When they interviewed the candidates, they had narrowed it down to 7 people, and they asked every single one of them in those interviews, who would you pick if it wasn't you? And the other 6 people all said the same name, Neil Gorsuch, and that's why you saw him get this highest rating possible from the ABA. So I think that's an enormous achievement for a 49-year-old justice who's going to be on the court for 20, 30 years.
He seems to be, President Trump, exercising his military muscle a little bit more in terms of what he did with Syria, the moves that he's making as regards to both North Korea and threats with Iran. Where do you see this, first with regard to North Korea? Yeah. Is this going to end up being a military?
Well, I think we all hope not, but potentially. We have to ask ourselves, are we prepared to live not just with a nuclear North Korea, they already are that, but with Kim Jong-un having the capability of delivering a nuclear warhead to the continental United States? And if you're not prepared to live with that, if you believe that that is an unacceptable outcome, then you're going to have to make some very difficult decisions about how you prevent it. And the thing about foreign policy is we don't get a real good choice and a real bad choice. You oftentimes get 2 less than ideal choices. You're trying to figure out which of these 2 choices is the best one, even though they're bad. And that could very well turn out to be the case. In the broader context of foreign policy, I would say that foreign policy is at its best when there's a strategy and your tactics, airstrikes, sanctions, are being driven by achieving that strategy. I don't believe the White House has a strategy yet, but they're less than 100 days in. Most White Houses do not, and certainly this one, who was less than ideological in the campaign, does not. They're working on it. I know that they are, and we've had a lot of input, for example, on the Western Hemisphere strategy. So ideally, you want to see these decisions about the sorts of things you've asked me about, airstrikes, sanctions, and the like, being driven by the strategy.
What should our strategy be with Iran, then?
Well, in the case of Iran, you have to look at the deal and say, does this deal prevent what we don't want, and that is a nuclear Iran? And I believe it will not. What it does is ultimately allow them to retain enrichment and reprocessing capability. So they're still conducting, the equipment's the same equipment. Meanwhile, they continue to build their long-range missile capabilities, where I think you'll see in 10 or 12 years, because this is lifted sanctions, is Iran has more resources, and those resources are now going into developing their long-range missiles. And in about 10 or 12 years, if Iran decides we want a nuclear weapon, and we have rockets now that we can put them on, not only do you have a nuclear Iran, but a nuclear Iran capable of reaching the continental United States.
But isn't a nuclear Iran 10 or 12 years from now better than a nuclear Iran that might have been available a year from now or less?
So,
which was what President Obama was striving to prevent, was delaying the inevitable.
Yes, except I don't think it does, because what it didn't touch on is the missiles. And so ultimately, Iran, if they wanted to already, today, they could reprocess and enrich. That was true before the deal. The equipment's already there, and they know how to do it. They just need a few months to do it. What they still don't have is a long-range intercontinental ballistic missile that they can launch from somewhere in Iran and reach New York City or Miami, Florida, or Washington, D.C. That is untouched by the deal. That's what we really should have focused a lot on, and it was completely outside the parameters of this agreement.
I just want to be clear, because I may have misunderstood what you said a second ago. Are you saying that Iran is within 3 or 4 months of having a nuclear weapon once they want it?
If they wanted to begin to enrich uranium.
But that's a different thing.
It is, but ultimately, I don't think anyone would dispute that if Iran wanted to, they already have the equipment, they have the scientific know-how. If they wanted to enrich or reprocess, there's nothing standing in the way from them to enrich their weapons grade. And once you've enriched the weapons grade, you don't even have to have a bomb. You just have to show the capability to have, because the bomb design is the easiest part. Once you have designed, once you prove that you have that capability, you are a nuclear capable state. And the minute that you become a nuclear capable state, even if you don't deploy them, it already gives you extraordinary leverage, especially if you have the long-range delivery system, which is untouched by this deal. The deal did not touch the long-range missiles, and the only reason why you need an ICBM like that is because you're going to put a man on the moon, which Iran's not going to do.
I have only one last question, which I wanted to ask you about. Last weekend at Mar-a-Lago, President Trump met with 2 former presidents of Colombia, Uribe and Pastrana. The press in Colombia is reporting that meeting was arranged by you. Was it?
No, I didn't have anything to do with that meeting.
You had nothing to do with that meeting?
Well, I'm a big fan of President Uribe. I didn't even know he was in Florida. And beyond it, I would say to you that that said, I don't see what the problem is, but my understanding is it wasn't even a meeting. My understanding is President Uribe and the former president
Pastrana?
happened to head over to the Mar-a-Lago and bump into the president while he was there, but I didn't even know President Rubio would be in Florida.
Have you encouraged President Trump to not follow through with the $450 million in foreign aid that President Obama had pledged to Colombia?
On the contrary, I'm in favor of it. I'm in favor of Plan Colombia. The only thing the decision about whether or not to do a deal with the FARC belongs to the Colombian people. They had a referendum. They voted against it. President Santos went in a different direction, got it implemented. They're going to have elections in Colombia in a year. They're going to choose a new president, and that's up to them. That's a democracy and a sovereign country. My only argument is we're not going to spend any of our money supporting. That's what I'm against. I'm not in favor of any money going towards support for the FARC. I'm not in favor of our money going towards creating these criminal courts where Colombians who were out there pursuing the drug war alongside the United States are now being put on trial for having worked with us to wipe out these criminal elements. We're not going to accept these FARC terrorists who have committed crimes and killed and harmed Americans traveling to the United States on diplomatic visas because they got some seat in the Congress. And we're not going to be releasing Simone Trinidad, a FARC commander, in jail, convicted in the United States as some sort of an interchange. But as far as doing a deal or not, that's up to the Colombian people.
Okay. Senator, thank you very much.